Well, despite our electoral system favouring the big three, a number of commentators have suggested that one of the smaller parties could make a breakthrough in the forthcoming general election. The UK Independence Party got over 16% of the vote at last year's European elections, and today UKIP delegates are gathering in Milton Keynes, where they'll hear from their former leader Nigel Farage, who probably stands the greatest chance of gaining a seat, and from their new leader, Lord Pearson. Well, earlier this morning I spoke to Lord Pearson and I began by asking him what evidence he had that his party were going to do any better at this general election.
Well, the only evidence we have at the moment is the feedback from our canvassing, from our prospective parliamentary candidates all over the country. And the feedback we're getting at the moment is that we will do very much better than that.
Yes, but very much better may not still produce any seats. There's no doubt that people and the public view you as an anti-European party, which is why you've been successful at European elections. But when it comes to the general election, we've got a very Eurosceptic Tory party. They'll vote for David Cameron's Conservatives.
Well, first of all, of course, the general election is on our absurd first-past-the-post system. In the European elections, which was proportional representation, we did actually come second. We beat the government of the day. And one absolute disaster for the country would be if David Cameron were to achieve a working majority and be in power for 5 years.
Why would that be a disaster? Why would that be a disaster?
Well, if you'll let me, I was just about to tell you, which is that he has ruled out any form of referendum on our EU membership for 5 years. That means 5 more years of ever deeper integration. Even if we don't win that many seats, what I want us to do is to contribute precisely to a hung parliament.
Pearson, you're saying you would rather have a hung parliament where that, in your view, would lead to a certain amount of indecision and instability, and that would be better for the country in these straitened economic times than having a majority for a party that you were once a member of?
The cost of our EU membership, when we're talking about our economy, really has to be brought to the fore, and we would be able to insist from the position of a hung parliament at the next general election that no Westminster party will gain power unless they give the British people the referendum that they were promised on whether we should be in the European Union or not.
So you're going to risk... You're going to risk a Tory majority. You would rather there was a hung parliament or the possibility of a Lib-Lab pact, in that sense, than the Tories getting in, even though you are closer to the Tories than any other party, and this is a very Eurosceptic Tory party.
No, it isn't. This is a Tory party that has ruled out a referendum, which it promised us, on whether we want to stay in the European Union or not. This is not a Eurosceptic party at all. It talks complete rubbish, like saying it's going to repatriate social and labour policy, which it isn't. It promises a Sovereignty Act, which is completely irrelevant. The Sovereignty Act is deceitful, because if there were any more powers to be taken by Brussels, which it's hard to think of any that they need, if they were, then the British government could veto it in the Council.
Now,
so the Sovereignty Act is a straight lie.
Right. Now, Lord Pearson, you still sound then like UKIP is a one-trick pony. You've nothing else to talk about and nothing else to say to the British people apart from its relationship with Europe.
No, I'm glad to say it isn't so. We have full policies on every subject, which is something of a departure. And the point about the European Union, you can say, well, it's boring and down the agenda and people aren't interested. But the two leading subjects in this general election are going to be the economy and immigration. And you can't really do anything about either if you stay in the European Union.
Your party's former leader, Nigel Farage, recently called the European President, Herman van Rompuy, a damp rag and a low-grade bank clerk. Is that the sort of political debate that you want the party to engage in?
Well, I don't think we should be too sensitive about this sort of debate. There is such a thing as freedom of speech, you know. It comes fairly expensive, obviously, in the European Parliament. I think Nigel was good enough to apologise afterwards. He did apologise to bank clerks the world over. And I'm perfectly content with what Nigel said. It was noticed, and he asked one very good question. He said to Mr. Van Rompuy, "Who are you?" And the answer to that is that Mr. Van Rompuy is now our ruler. He's more powerful than the British government. And he is the man who instigates all new European law, which is then goes through a secretive process in Brussels, and there's nothing the House of Commons and the House of Lords can do about it.
Lord Pearson talking to me a little earlier this morning. Andrew Pearce, is it a problem for the Conservatives?
That's less of a problem now. You've got the leader of UKIP saying he thinks it's better for the country to be in a hung parliament territory where the Liberal Democrats, federalist party that would give away even more powers to the European Union, the European Commission, would be in a single currency 20 years ago if they could. If he's saying it's better for the country to be in that situation, that's going to be very helpful for David Cameron. It's also a bit mad because nobody can deny this is the most Eurosceptic Tory party in a long time.
So, does he?
They abandoned the European People's Party, infuriating Mrs Merkel and Sarkozy in the process, infuriating Ken Clarke, but they've buttoned him down until after the election at least. And so I think Cameron will be quite concerned. But I tell you what I really think, the idea of a hung parliament is going to make those Tory Eurosceptics who would have been tempted to vote UKIP, even notwithstanding what he just said, much more likely to vote Tory.
So is it good for Labour and, of course, the prospect of a hung parliament?
I think it probably is. I think, you know, Lord Pearson of fruitcake is going to be extremely good because there's very little difference between large chunks of the Tory party and him. If you look at the surveys, Conservative Home Survey, on who's coming in, the new candidates for the Conservative Party, they are more rabidly anti-European and let's get out now than any Conservative party has been before.
So it'd be silly to stand against those sort of candidates, wouldn't it?
Well, you'd think it was, but on the other hand, there are a lot of people in the Conservative Party and a lot of Conservative supporters who hate the Cameron modernising feeling. You know, the Tebbits. If you can get Norman Tebbit saying he's thinking of voting UKIP, my goodness, that carries quite a lot of weight. And he's said that, which is extraordinary. And why he hasn't been thrown out of the Conservative Party, can't think.
But the great interest for the Tories, part of them, they so loathe John Bercow, the Speaker, who I think had 3 Tories supporting him for the Speaker, Bercow being one of them. And, of course, Bercow's facing Nigel Farage, the very colourful, flamboyant leader.
Is there a chance, really?
I don't think there is, because the majority is about 17,000 or 18,000. But Tebbit has actually said, why don't Tories go and campaign for him? And I know lots of Tory MPs who say that's one seat they don't mind losing.
There could be some big
Which
fights.
you can't have in a hung parliament.
No,
you can't afford to lose any seats.
There could be
Although I
some
don't
big
think there will
fights
be a
ahead.
hung parliament.
You don't?
No, I think the Tories will win with a small majority. Not that
We'll
they
get you
deserve
back
it,
in on May the 7th. If that's, of course, when the election is.